I get asked this question all the time. If I had to pick one AI tool that would be applicable to the broader audience of authors out there, not just the audience of authors that are wanting to write books with AI, but really for any author in any walk of life, what would I recommend? And my answer is always one tool, or at least one type of tool, and that is deep research. Deep research is essentially a small AI agent that goes out and finds information on the web about whatever topic you're researching. And it does a thorough study of everything out there. And then it condenses all of that knowledge into a very thorough, almost article like format. Google was the first company to roll out a deep research tool. And since then, multiple companies have jumped on that bandwagon. Today, I'm going to be testing out 4 of them and giving you some comparisons and contrasts, talk about which one is the most powerful, in my opinion, and which one is my personal favorite. And we see they might not be the same one. The ones we're going to be testing today are Google's research tool via Gemini, Perplexity's deep research tool, ChatGPT's deep research tool, and Grok's deep research tool. So let's get in. All right, so they all have very similar functions. Right here we have Gemini Advanced. If you are subscribed to Gemini Advanced, you can access this here. I think even if you are not subscribed to Gemini Advanced, you can get a few generations of deep research for free. But if you are wanting to use Gemini, you can come here, select Deep Research with 2.5 Pro, and then you put your query in here and you can see it's labeled as Deep Research. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask it, we're going to pick a very niche genre and have it give us information about that genre so we can study the genre. This is something I recommend you do for every genre that you get into. Really study that genre, and deep research is probably one of the best ways to do that, short of actually reading a whole bunch of books in that genre. So let's go ahead and pick a niche genre. I want you to give me a thorough overview of the atom punk genre. Yeah, we can just leave it at that. I'm going to keep it kind of surface level, very, very general. Now, I've already done a whole bunch of tests with other queries, but I've not done this specific one yet. So we're going to get that going here in Gemini and then run the same prompt in other tools. Now, this is Perplexity. And in Perplexity, it's a very similar thing. You have your main window here. Now, I am subscribed to Perplexity Pro, but you can also access this on the free version. Just select Deep Research and then put your query in here. Make sure that's selected and let that go. This is ChatGPT. In this, you can select, I think, a variety of different models, but for the purposes of this one, I'm going to select GPT 4.5 and then make sure you have Deep Research selected here. Then input your query and let that go. And then finally, we have Grok. This is grok.com. Very similar process around the board. All you have to do is put your query in here. And Grok actually has 2 versions. There's Deep Search and then there's Deeper Search. So I'm not entirely certain what the difference is between the two, but it sounds like Deeper Search is a more extensive research. So we're just going to select that and let it go. Now, there are some quirks to how these work. Perplexity and Grok will just dive right in and get started, but Gemini and ChatGPT have one extra step. So first of all, Gemini will give us a list of websites that it's going to go through and give you kind of a plan of what it's going to do. And this is kind of cool. You can see, like, this is the approach it's going to take. This is a resource intensive thing to run. And so it makes sense that they would give you this research step, this plan, so that you could identify, oh, actually, that's not really what I wanted it to talk about, etc. So we're going to go ahead and say, yep, this is good, but you can go here and edit the plan if you wanted to take a slightly different approach. Otherwise, we just say start research and it will get started. ChatGPT does something a little different. It usually asks a clarifying question or two after you've given it that initial query. So here it says, to give you a thorough overview of the atom punk genre, could you let me know what angle you're most interested in? For example, are you looking for origins and historic context? Key themes, aesthetics, and tropes, examples from literature, film, video games, or art, comparisons to other genres like cyberpunk and dieselpunk, influence on pop culture and design. So this is a good Clarifying question. Since I am researching this from a author point of view, I don't necessarily need to know its history and origin and stuff, although that could be useful. So I'm going to say, let's do 2, maybe 3 and 4. And I'm going to give it the context like I am researching this as an author who wants to write an atom punk book. And it says, got it. I'll put together a deep overview of the atom punk genre focused on these things. I'll organize it clearly so it's useful from a writer's perspective, and I'll let you know as soon as it's ready. So now it's getting started. So while these are going, and these can sometimes take a while to generate, let's talk a little bit about what this costs, and depending on what plan you're on or what tool you're using, how many times can you use deep research, because there's a limit. Let's go, and I actually used Perplexity's deep research tool to get this information, and don't worry, I did verify the sources here that this information is accurate, but I asked it to compare the different price points and usage limits for all 4 of these deep research tools, and it gave me a really good response. So we have for Perplexity first. If you are a free user, you're limited to 5 deep research queries per day. And for pro subscribers, it's essentially unlimited deep research queries. Although I did find over here when it's talking about the DeepSeek R1 model that you're limited to 500 queries per day. So essentially, that's unlimited. Most people are not going to be doing 500 queries per day, right? So that's that. ChatGPT deep research is far more limited. So on the free tier, you get only 2 deep research queries per month, which is insane to me. Plus users, which is the $20 a month plan, get 10 deep research queries per month. So still not a whole lot, right? We'll skip Team and Enterprise since I'm assuming most of you are not on that. And Pro users, which is the $200 a month plan, get 120 deep research queries per month. Used to be 100. And I like that it gave this key distinction for ChatGPT is that the limit resets on a monthly basis rather than daily. Perplexity was resets every day. Now, Grok also has some limits on it. So for the free plan with Grok, you get 10 deep research requests every 24 hours. So a lot more, even a few more than what Perplexity does. For the premium plan, you get 20 deep research requests every 2 hours. So a lot more there. Essentially, that's close to the unlimited amount. It's rare that you're going to need more than 20 deep research sessions in 2 hours. And then if you're a Super Grok or Premium Plus plan, which is a $30 a month plan with Grok /X, you get 30 deep research requests every 2 hours. So that's a lot. Compared to ChatGPT, for example, right up there at the same level of Perplexity, roughly. And then we get Gemini. Gemini had for regular users and non-advanced, so this is basically free users. It does not specify what the limit is. I imagine it maybe depends on the question and the output and all of that. But for advanced users, you get approximately 20 deep research queries per day. So not as much as Perplexity and Grok, but a lot more than what ChatGPT offers. And then Perplexity gave me this handy comparison here between the 4. So Perplexity Pro is essentially unlimited. Gemini is 20 per day, Grok is 30 every 2 hours on its highest plan, and ChatGPT Pro is 120 per month on its highest plan, which is $200 a month. It's going to be a lot less for most people unless you have that $200 a month plan. So what I realized when looking at this and in my experiments is that we're actually kind of dealing with 2 different classes of deep research here. There's a sort of less expensive, maybe a little bit less thorough kind that Perplexity and Grok is using, and a much more in-depth version that ChatGPT and Gemini are using, especially ChatGPT. And that is why they are more expensive, or at least the usage limits are much more limited with ChatGPT and Gemini compared to Perplexity and Grok. The other thing I noticed is that tracks with how long it was taking for my experimental prompts to run. I'll bet if we go look at the results right now, we'll see Gemini is still running, Perplexity is done. So we can already look at that one. ChatGPT also still running, and Grok is also done. So Grok and Perplexity finished first, and in my test, that was the case there as well. They finished about the same time, and they also had roughly the same word count as well. I noticed in some of the tests that I ran that the word count was significantly increased for Gemini and even more increased for ChatGPT. I did one prompt with ChatGPT where I asked it to give me an overview of the daily life in feudal Japan, which is the kind of thing that if you're a historical fiction author, you would probably be doing those kind of requests quite a bit. It gave me an output, get this, that was 25,000 words long. By comparison, Gemini gave me one that was 10,000 words long, so pretty long, but smaller. And Perplexity and Deep Research were both around 2,000 words. So much shorter, condensed versions, and the one that ChatGPT was just so massive, like 25,000 words, that's a book. Like you could essentially release a book about feudal Japan and daily life, and you would have enough content just from that one response. Now, I'm not recommending that you go out and use Deep Research to write books, because if anybody can access these things through Deep Research, then why would they need to buy a book from you? This is one of those things that's disrupting the industry, is how we learn, right? I'm currently using Deep Research tools more and more often to learn things rather than actually going and reading books about them. The only books that I do read are, or at least nonfiction books, are ones where I've sort of connected to the person who wrote it, and they have their own sort of unique approach to something. But just like general information, the kind of stuff that you could technically find if you did enough research online anyway, that's sort of just out there in the realm of information that we have access to, that's the sort of thing that Deep Research is now replacing in my life. I'm no longer really reading a ton of books on subjects like that because I can just do the deep research, right? Unless I really want to go in depth on a topic. Anyway, it's a great tool so far, so I'm going to get back to you. We're going to let these run because sometimes they take quite a while. On my last test, ChatGPT took a full half an hour to run. So I'm going to get back to you as soon as these are done running, and then we'll continue on and I'll show you the difference between them. Okay, so all of the deep researches have finished running and we can go through and start to compare them. Now, obviously, we can't read through everything right here and right now, especially because some of them are quite lengthy, but you should be able to get a sense for all of the topics that they cover and whether or not they're good or not. So let's start with Gemini. So Gemini wrote a little over 9,000 words, so pretty lengthy. And we start with an introduction. It's got everything in this like regular outline format, starting with the number 1 here, then moving to the letter A, which I suppose is probably an outline format that makes it easier for the AI to keep things structured. But we start with defining atom punk in the retrofuturistic landscape, core concepts and terminology. Then we move to the atomic age, history, and cultural bedrock. So it's getting into the history surrounding where this genre even comes from. Then we talk about it as a mode of retrofuturism. And we get into the second part, which is the aesthetic. So visually, the aesthetic here, and we got visual hallmarks, architectural manifestations, fashion and character design, technological motifs, and then we get the third section, which is origins, development, and genre relations. So all of this has been sort of background for now. We get tracing the genesis, the influences, and emergence. This one's really interesting, atom punk versus steampunk versus diesel punk, which is a nice, useful comparison there, including some common themes between them, as well as like, what the heck does the punk suffix mean? I think that's useful there. And it even puts it into a table to really understand the differences between these different genres, which I thought that was actually a genuinely useful thing. It's not something I asked for because I just kept it a very broad, like give me a broad overview, but it definitely delivered a whole bunch of things that I find genuinely useful here. Then we get atom punk across media. So this is section 4. So this is like what it looks like in literature, film and television, and of course video games. I'll bet you Fallout is not on here. That's really interesting. Atomic Heart is. That makes sense. Oh, here it is. Fallout. It's so important they put it at the top here. It's kind of the poster child for atom punk. Then we get number 5, thematic concerns, exploring the atom punk worldview, nuclear optimism and fear, Cold War anxieties, the final frontier, critiques of consumerism and suburban life. Yep, this is all accurate. Utopian ideals and dystopian realities. Then we get section 6, so this is clarifying boundaries. So distinguishing it from ray gun gothic. Interesting. I didn't even know what ray gun gothic was. is architecture as an influence, not synonym, cultural impact. So we got the legacy, influence on modern art, and then a conclusion. Okay, so it did a pretty good job of giving me a whole bunch of overview of the atom punk genre. What I find interesting is it didn't really have a section outlining specific tropes or obligatory chapters and stuff like that. Maybe if I had put more into the plan about how I want this to cover stuff like that, it would have. And if you recall, ChatGPT did ask me a clarifying question. And in that clarifying question, I said, okay, this is a guide for authors who want to write atom punk stories. And I also had it narrow down the topic a little bit. So let's look at that next. So ChatGPT also wrote a little over 9,000 words. So not as much as my previous query about what life was like in feudal Japan, where it wrote like 25,000 words or so, but still a lot. And it should be a little bit more dialed into the specific topic here, which is for writers, like applying this topic to writers. So we have first an introduction, key themes, aesthetics, and tropes. So here we go with the tropes. And then the aesthetics, the Google one covered, nuclear technology, Cold War paranoia. Yep, this is all kind of similar stuff. Notable examples of atom punk in media. So we got a couple of things here. Do androids dream of electric sheep? I feel like that's more cyberpunk. Age Atomic. Let's make sure video games that we've got. Okay, so we got Atomic Heart and then the Fallout series. There we go. They have a lot of the same ones here. Bioshock, yeah, maybe. And a few that are kind of borderline there. Visual art and design, that's also covered by the Google one. Atom punk versus other speculative genres. So we have versus cyberpunk versus diesel punk versus steampunk, which is also and versus ray gun gothic. I guess this is something that I didn't know about, but this is all the same information covered in the Google one as well. And then it has a conclusion. So a lot of the same information. In fact, I would say this one, just from how much content there is for each of these major bullet points here, I would say the ChatGPT one does seem to be more thorough. They are about the same word count, but the ChatGPT one, because I asked it to, did not go into historical context and detail like that. So it spent most of its time just talking about the tropes and the design and stuff like that. So all in all, both of them did a decent job. I would say they're both kind of at the same level. You might give a little bit of an edge to Gemini because of the fact that it, first of all, it finished a little quicker. And also, if we look at what Gemini gave me, I feel like some of the reporting on the sources that it used was really cool. Like it says the sources used in the report, but also sources that were read but not used in the report. And it also gives you the thought process because there is a thinking model involved here. And so you can actually see the process it went through to get to the answers that it gave you. Now, ChatGPT does give me some of those things. It gave me the thought process and a list of sources. It did not give me the list of sources that it might have reviewed but didn't actually include in the report. Plus, I just found out that if you select this button here in the Google version, you can actually generate an audio overview. So that's kind of interesting. So you could listen to a sort of summary of the thing, which is pretty cool. So of the two, I would give the edge to Gemini a little bit, especially because it's a little bit cheaper, or rather you get more uses out of it. But let's take a look at the other two, which I would consider to be maybe a sort of mid-level deep research rather than this really high intense type of deep research. And that comes from Perplexity and from Grok. Let's look at Perplexity first. So first of all, it formatted things nicer. And this is one of the things that I liked about Perplexity and Grok a little bit better than Google and ChatGPT is that it seems a little bit more scannable. Yeah, there's some chunks of text in here, but it's broken up a lot more by subheadings. And if we look at the one for Grok, it's pretty close to the same thing. Yes, a couple of big paragraphs here and there. But if you look at that compared to Gemini, for example, it's just big walls of text, which as someone with an SEO background who's written a lot of articles for the web, it just kind of makes my heart hurt a little bit. Seeing these giant walls of text, there are definitely ways that you could format this in a way that it's easier for people to read. And the same goes for ChatGPT, just a bunch of just giant walls of text and huge bullet points. I don't like making bullet points this big, but I understand that's just more of an aesthetic thing. As far as actual quality of the content, I'm sure they're both great, but I liked both Perplexity and Grok a little bit better for their scannability. But anyway, getting back to Perplexity, it looks like we're covering a lot of the same topics. So we have the origins and definitions, some historical context, the aesthetic elements and visual language. That was all covered before. Thematic elements and narrative approaches, notable examples in cultural impact, distinction from other punk genres, and the conclusion. So very much the exact same type of information, but maybe in a little bit more of a brief format, because it talks about this, all of the same things, but there's clearly not as many words per section. And in fact, I looked at the word count for Perplexities and it was about 2,000 words. So significantly less than what ChatGPT and Gemini gave us. But covering all of the same topics, as you can clearly see. Now for Grok, let's take a look at this one. One of the things I liked about Grok was that it gave me this key points thing at the very beginning, which kind of summarized the research overall. It also gave me all of the thinking, so you can look through what the thinking gave me and what it researched. It also tells you which posts and things and articles that it researched. Additionally, Grok has clear access to X. So if you're doing anything that might be more timely or more recent, like, what news happened yesterday, kind of a thing, Grok might actually be a better option for that because it's more privy to real-time, very recent news. But if we just go look through what it gave us, so it gave us the definition and scope, examples in the media, a comprehensive overview of the atom punk genre. So we have historical and cultural context, definition and origins, which feels like a repeat from definition and scope here. Key characteristics, including aesthetic, themes, tone, and technology, which definitely fits. Differences from other related genres. Again, we're having the same sort of thing. So we got Ray Gun Gothic, Diesel Punk, and Steampunk. And notable works from literature, film, television, and video games. Of course, we have the Fallout series in there and the Outer Worlds. Yep. And then impact and legacy. So a lot of the same topics, but done so in a much more succinct format. Let's talk a little bit about which one I use most frequently and which one I think is the best. As you can tell, there's really two classes here. There is the sort of quicker, more cursory overview of a topic that you get from Grok and Perplexity. And if you want something that goes a lot more in depth and is a little bit more text heavy and probably gives you a lot more specific details, then you'll want to look at either ChatGPT or Gemini. Of the four, I think the most powerful one, my personal favorite in terms of like absolute potential, and also factoring cost in there, is Gemini. I would go with Gemini in most cases, unless you want to really, one of the nice things about ChatGPT is that it did go even above and beyond what Gemini could do at times. So in some of my tests, it wrote significantly more. So there may be cases where you want to essentially read a small book about a particular topic, in which case ChatGPT might be for you. But for most of you who just want a really in-depth look at a particular topic, I would probably go with Gemini over ChatGPT. If for no other reason than cost alone, they're certainly very, very neck and neck together. However, that being said, I actually find myself using Perplexity's deep research a lot more. This is partly because I am a huge fan of Perplexity as a tool, and I'm actually going to do a whole video about it in the near future, walking you through everything that it has to offer and how I use it in my business. It is probably the most used tool in terms of singular AI tools that I use. It's absolutely fantastic. And so I find myself using that very frequently. If you compare Perplexity's general search when you're just talking about a topic, so not deep research, just its regular search function, and you compare that to Google's regular search function, so not deep research, I actually find that Perplexity gets it right way more than Google does. And so for that reason, I actually think Perplexity might have a somewhat better way of parsing through all the data a little bit. I find it gives me more accurate answers, and I find the answers are more easy to understand. In fact, I've been using it a lot in recent weeks to troubleshoot technical issues that I'm having. I've been getting into a sort of like retro gaming hobby on the side, just to have something to have fun with, that is not related to my job at all. Because of that, that's a field that requires a lot of technical know-how, and there are some good guides out there, but if you run into an issue at all, like it can be very, very difficult to troubleshoot those issues if you're not like a super amazing technically savvy person. And so I have actually been using Perplexity to answer questions about like, wait, this didn't work for me. What can I try? That sort of thing. And it actually got the answers correct and walked me through the problem in a way that was helpful. And Google was not able to do that. Even using Google to find pages where people might be answering the topic did not help. With Perplexity, I was able to just go in and it would give me the step-by-step instructions on what to do. And I didn't even have to research the forums or the websites that that information came from, and it worked. That was the most amazing thing to me. So for that reason, I tend to trust Perplexity, at least for informational searches, better than I do Google right now. And I'm actually using it more than I use Google. And so for that reason, I find myself using its deep research tool, which is just like a souped up version of its regular search tool, far more often than any of the others on this list. Grok is also good. Like I would say it's pretty close in quality to Perplexity. However, I do think that you might want to prefer Grok over anything real time. Like if you wanted to say, hey, can you summarize the news from yesterday? That might be something that Grok can do that the others might not be able to do as well. I haven't tested that one. And in fact, let's test it between Grok and Perplexity. Can you summarize the news for April 13th, 2025? That's yesterday as I'm recording this. Let that do, we'll do that with deep research. And then let's go to Grok and give it the same query with deeper search selected and see what it gives us. So Grok even says the request is for news summary from April 13, 2025, which was yesterday. So it does know the accurate date here. It's looking up a lot of the news. So in Perplexity, this is what it gave us. So as we begin the new week, several significant developments have unfolded across politics, international relations, and culture. We have Trump's tariff strategy creates market uncertainty. So this is not new news, but maybe there was some, looks like there is some news that is more recent here. If I look at the sources that it gave me on some of these, you can see, okay, yeah, so this is drawing from April 13th, and this is drawing from April 13th. So it's looking at summaries here, and it's categorized it in nice little sections. So we have international relations, domestic security concerns, Iran's internal situation, culture, and entertainment. Now for Grok, it gave us the key points, which I do like that it does that. So it says major news included an arson attack in Pennsylvania, Governor Josh Shapiro's residence in a deadly Russian missile strike in Sumy, or Ukraine. Research suggests U.S. immigration policy involved deporting 10 gang members to El Salvador, while President Trump's tariff plans on electronics were also highlighted. The evidence leans toward ongoing legal battles over a wrongfully deported U.S. citizen and political activity with Bernie Sanders speaking at Coachella. Okay, so definitely gave us some web pages. Interestingly enough, Grok did not look at tweets here. So I find that to be kind of interesting. It did pull 40 source pages here, whereas Perplexity looked at 19. So potentially a little bit of an edge to Grok for some of the things it did, but all in all, they're pretty close to each other. I think either one would work. So it just depends on which ecosystem you're in the most. Personally, as a big fan of Perplexity, I literally use the app every single day. It's probably one of my most used apps on my phone. It's probably what I'm going to go to. And honestly, I think with any of these, they all function similarly enough that you're not going to see many differences and issues between them, other than the fact that Perplexity and Grok seem to be more like low powered, a little bit more surface level deep research. So something between just a regular prompt and what like ChatGPT does for its deep research, for example. And then you have the higher tier, which is ChatGPT and Gemini, which go much more in depth. So my recommendation would probably be to use one of the smaller ones for most of your queries, unless you have something that you really want to go deep on, in which case I would use either Gemini or ChatGPT, with my personal preference being Gemini. Now, if you like this video and the content I produce on this channel, I have a free group that you can join that gives you access to a bunch of free goodies, including my plot module template, which a lot of people have said they would pay for, as well as a mini course about AI foundations and making sure you have the basics down before you progress to more advanced stuff. Plus, it's a thriving community with thousands of members at this point. So if you're interested in that, go check out the link below, and I will see you in the next video.